Come here.
No. I think I'm having a panic attack.
Come here.
Yeah,
Right here.
You think you're the only one who lost people? What do you think we're doing here?
Have you ever noticed that most Marvel heroes often stall at the exact moment they should be evolving the most? That's because the MCU keeps breaking the one fundamental rule of character growth. And every time it breaks that rule, it creates a fascinating paradox that stops its biggest characters from ever actually growing up and reaching their true potential.
Are you crying?
Yes.
Okay, quick detour. I promise it pays off. Mythologist Joseph Campbell believed the greatest hero stories all shared the same hidden structure, and almost every version of that structure begins with a mentor. Think Gandalf, Dumbledore, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Dorpheus.
Dorpheus.
I'm Morpheus's brother.
Different worlds, same job. Each of them spends time teaching, protecting, and guiding the hero. But when the journey reaches its most dangerous stage, the mentor is required to die, or at minimum, disappear hard enough from the narrative so that the hero is completely on their own. Why? Because mentors aren't supposed to stick around forever.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
Think of it like training wheels. They're great right up until the moment they're the only reason you're still upright. At some point, somebody has to take them off, or you never actually learn to ride the bike. That's the deal old stories made with their audience. The teacher exits, the student falls, and falling is the whole point. The MCU looked at that deal and said,
We're not savages.
so why? Why would a franchise built on hero stories break the one rule most hero story depends on? Here's the honest version. In a shared universe, your mentors are also your franchises. Gandalf never had a quarterly earnings call to think about. Tony Stark kind of did. He's the franchise, a merchandising empire, and the connective tissue holding half the timeline together. You can't just let him fall into an abyss in Act 2 of somebody else's origin story. He's too valuable. He has to keep showing up. So instead of the mentor dying and leaving the hero alone in the wilderness, the MCU invented something new. The mentor who never really leaves. He just goes invisible. Now you know why the paradox exists. Let's watch it play out, hero after hero. Remember that training wheels metaphor from a minute ago? Marvel didn't just use it as a vibe, they coded it. Literally into Spider-Man's suit. Peter gets recruited by Stark to fight the Avengers at an airport, and from that moment on, the MCU's version of Spider-Man stops being the broke kid from Queens who builds his own gadgets out of stubbornness and desperation. He becomes Stark's intern. Then, in Homecoming, the entire emotional engine of that movie isn't, can Peter save the city? It's, can Peter get Tony Stark to be proud of him? By the end of that film, Peter turns down the fancy Stark suit. Feels like growth, right? Feels like the kid choosing independence. Except, and this is the part that stings, it's an illusion. And the very next movie proves it. The follow-up opens with Tony dead, and you'd think, okay, here we go. Here's the real mentor's death story. This is where Peter finally stands alone. Instead, the entire plot of that movie is Peter mishandling his dead mentor's leftover power, Edith, and getting emotionally hijacked by Mysterio, a villain who understood something true about him. He's a kid desperately auditioning for a replacement father figure, and he'll hand the keys to anyone who plays the part convincingly enough.
See, that wasn't so hard.
Compare that for a second to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, the one where Peter loses his powers entirely. That crisis is internal. It's about a kid drowning under the weight of his own choices. No billionaires involved, no inherited tech, just a guy who can't pay rent, can't save his relationships, and can't figure out who he's supposed to be. More importantly, there's nobody left to answer that question for him. No mentor waiting in the wings with a better suit or a smarter plan. Peter has to decide, completely on his own, whether being Spider-Man is still worth the cost. That's the version we grew up to love, because the victory didn't come from getting stronger. It came from discovering who he was without anyone telling him. The MCU spent 2 movies trying to manufacture that same gut punch, but the emotional engine is completely different. Peter isn't wrestling with his own identity as much as he's wrestling with Tony Stark's legacy. He's inheriting suits, satellites, impossible expectations, and even cleaning up villains created by Tony's mistakes. The question quietly shifts from, who am I, to, "Can I become the next Iron Man?" Those sound similar, but they're answering completely different questions. One is about identity, the other is about inheritance, and that's exactly what the mentor paradox does. Instead of forcing the hero to stand alone, it keeps the mentor's shadow in the room long after the mentor is gone.
You gonna be the next Iron Man now?
Well, no, I don't have time. I'm too busy doing your jobs. What? I'm kidding. Look.
It took Aunt May's death, the loss of his friends, and every safety net Tony Stark had left behind before Peter was forced to stand completely on his own. Funny how that's the moment he finally starts feeling like Spider-Man. And here's the thing that really gets me. Stark's mentorship narratively could have gone to someone else. Remember Harley, the kid from the third Iron Man movie who helps Tony put himself back together after a panic attack? Real bond, earned chemistry. He's literally at Stark's funeral, set up like a clear successor. Marvel just drops him. Instead, the torch goes to Riri Williams, a genius in her own right who gets introduced already wearing Stark's aesthetic, his tech philosophy, his entire brand, for a man she never even met. She didn't inherit a mentor, she inherited a mood board. So that's Peter's version of the paradox, a mentor's tech that just won't quit. But this isn't just a gadget problem. Swap the sunglasses for a hammer, and the exact same trap shows up in a galaxy Tony Stark never even visited.
Do not touch me again.
Then don't take my stuff.
Thor's entire sense of self-worth starts out externalized into a piece of metal. His hammer isn't just a weapon. It's enchanted by his father with a worthiness clause, which means Thor's power is, quite literally, conditional on his father's approval. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual plot mechanism of the first movie he's in. It took until the third movie in his solo run for the franchise to actually make the hard choice.
Lost my father! I lost my hammer!
And in this gorgeous, quiet moment, the ghost of his father basically asks him, "Are you really defined by the hammer? Or are you something more than the thing you've been leaning on?" It's genuinely thrilling because it looked like the MCU was about to let a god grow up without his crutch. We got the best version of Thor in Infinity War, and from there it just kind of regresses. In Endgame and Thor, Love and Thunder, we got the lost king who can't look in a mirror arc, abandoning the throne he was supposedly built to hold, still chasing some external thing to fill the space where his dad used to be because he cannot reconcile his identity without Odin's overarching presence. It's like watching someone finally move out of their parents' house and then immediately rent an apartment 2 doors down.
Surprise.
Loki's version of this is sadder, honestly. His entire psychology is built around proving himself his father's equal, and every betrayal, every scheme, every attempt to take Earth is really just an adopted kid screaming for a parent who will never fully see him. He doesn't actually break the cycle until he gets pulled completely out of that universe, into the TVA, a bureaucratic organization that exists outside of time, where his father's name doesn't mean anything anymore, and he has to face versions of himself instead. He only heals once the gravity well of his dad is physically removed from the story.
I know what I want. I know what kind of god I need to be.
That's the pattern again. Real growth only shows up the moment the safety net is structurally impossible to reach. You've probably felt some version of this in your own life, actually. Think about the difference between a mentor who tells you, "I believe in you, now go," and one who just keeps texting you the answer every time you're about to fail. The second one feels nicer in the moment. It feels like love even, but it's not actually building anything in you. It's just delaying the moment you find out what you're capable of without them.
All right, Sam. Duty calls. Thanks for the run, if that's what you want to call running.
Oh, that's how it is? Oh, that's how it is.
Now, let's talk about what happens when the mentor isn't even around anymore. Because sometimes, the mentor doesn't need to be alive to keep holding the hero back. Sometimes, the legacy does the job all by itself. Sam Wilson inherits Captain America's shield, and instead of it feeling like freedom, it felt like carrying a mountain on his back. Steve wasn't just another Avenger. He was the MCU's moral North Star, the guy whose decisions were treated as the correct ones almost by default. When he passes the shield to Sam in Endgame, It's framed as the ultimate vote of confidence. The student has graduated. The training wheels are finally off. Except they aren't. Sam's first instinct is to give the shield away, not because he isn't brave enough to carry it, but because he genuinely believes nobody can, especially not him. And the Falcon and the Winter Soldier understood something the rest of this franchise often forgets. Inheriting a mentor's symbol isn't the same thing as inheriting their certainty. For Sam, Steve's version of Captain America isn't simply impossible to imitate. It was never built with his reality in mind. That's why Isaiah Bradley matters so much.
Leave it covered. Those stars and stripes don't mean nothing good to me.
He's the living proof that Steve's idealized vision of America had enormous blind spots. Sam doesn't become Captain America by trying to be another Steve. He becomes Captain America the moment he decides Steve's legacy isn't something to preserve in amber, it's something that has to evolve. For a second, it looks like Marvel is finally breaking the cycle, and then it slips right back into it. Because even after Sam accepts the shield, the conversation never really becomes about his Captain America.
Watch yourself. You're not Steve Rogers.
You're right. I'm not.
It keeps circling back to Steve's. Every new challenge comes with another reminder that Sam isn't his predecessor. Every criticism is measured against a man who's already become a legend.
The Captain America I dreamt of killing was bigger than you.
I'm happy to disappoint.
Instead of writing new chapters, the story keeps asking him to defend the old ones. That's what makes Steve's legacy different from Tony's. One is technological, the other is psychological, but they're both doing the same thing. They're keeping the mentor in the room long after the mentor has left it. The shield was supposed to be a sail that carried Sam towards something new. Instead, it often feels like an anchor, tying him to a ghost he can never outrun. And once you see it with Sam, you start seeing it everywhere. These are new heroes preloaded with somebody else's narrative baggage before they've even had a chance to define themselves. They don't get to set the tone of their own story. They inherit the previous tenant's furniture and have to live around it. At this point, it almost feels like Marvel doesn't quite know how to let heroes grow up. Except that's not actually true. Marvel has already solved this problem. They've just struggled to stay consistent.
And now you want to hand the nation over to this prince who could not keep his own father safe.
Black Panther did something almost nobody else in this franchise had the guts to do. It made the mentor's flaw the literal villain. T'Chaka isn't just T'Challa's father. He's the entire ideology of Wakanda wrapped in one man. Isolationist, secretive, protect our own, and let the rest of the world burn. T'Challa starts the movie trying to be a perfect copy of his father's politics. Then he finds out his father took out his own brother and abandoned a kid in Oakland to grow up alone, angry, and eventually dangerous. That kid becomes Killmonger, which means T'Challa's antagonist isn't some random cosmic threat, it's his father's sin, walking and talking and wearing a vibranium suit of his own. When T'Challa visits the ancestral plane and confronts his ancestors, he's not there for comfort. He's there to call them out. And that's the moment the movie earns its ending, because real growth here doesn't look like inheriting the throne respectfully. It looks like standing in front of your dead father's ghost and telling him he was wrong, in front of everyone who came before him. It's also worth noticing what the film does with Killmonger right alongside this. He's not given a redemption arc, but he is given the dignity of being right about the diagnosis, even while being catastrophically wrong about the cure. The film draws a quiet, devastating line. T'Challa had a family that, for all its flaws, stayed and fought for him. Killmonger had a family that abandoned him and called it protection. Same broken mentor, two completely different outcomes, depending entirely on who actually showed up.
How many times do I have to teach you? Just because something works doesn't mean that it cannot be improved.
You are teaching me. What do you know?
Shuri gets the healthier version of this from the jump. She respects her family, but she's constitutionally allergic to "we've always done it this way." If the old tech works, that just means it's due for an upgrade. That's basically her whole personality. And that skepticism toward inherited tradition is exactly why she survives losing both her father and her brother without completely shattering. She never built her identity on the pedestal in the first place, so when the pedestal falls, she doesn't fall with it. This next mentor is one of the more interesting figures in this entire franchise, because he's a grieving, controlling, immortal dad who turned his trauma into a training regimen for his son. Shang-Chi takes a different approach.
It's Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi.
Instead of chasing his mentor's approval or living under their shadow, he tries to outrun it, builds a whole personality out of being unremarkable. But it turns out, hiding from your mentor isn't the same thing as outgrowing them. It's just pause, not progress. When his father's organization yanks him back in, he's forced to actually look at the two competing blueprints he was handed: his mother's fluid, open-handed philosophy and his father's closed-fist brutality. The movie doesn't ask him to pick a side, it asks him to merge them. There's a cultural layer here that makes this hit differently than most of the other entries on this list too. In a lot of traditional family structures, a parent admitting fault to a child isn't a small gesture, it's close to unthinkable. A crack in the entire hierarchy the relationship is built on. So when this particular mentor never says the words, "I was wrong," out loud, that's not a writing oversight. It's the whole point. The apology has to be physical, not verbal, because verbal was never going to happen. And his death lands differently than most of the deaths on this list, because the final act isn't a defeat. It's handing his son the source of his power to save him. Shang-Chi doesn't reject his father's strength, he just refuses to wield it the way his father did. That's integration, not rejection. And it might be the single most mature version of this whole dynamic the franchise has ever pulled off.
My name is Ego. And I'm your dad, Peter.
But not every mentor leaves behind a legacy worth inheriting. Sometimes the final lesson isn't how to carry your mentor's strength forward. It's realizing the person you've been trying to become was never worth following in the first place. Peter Quill spends his whole arc chasing his biological father, convinced that finding him will finally make sense of his fractured identity. He gets exactly that. A literal, living planet who presents himself as the ultimate divine mentor, teaching Quill to access cosmic powers he never knew he had. Except this perfect father doesn't see a son. He sees a battery, a vessel for his own galaxy-sized narcissism. The most flattering mentor on this entire list turns out to be the most toxic one. Real fatherhood, it turns out, belongs to Yondu.
How's it going, you blue idiot?
The abrasive, morally compromised space pirate who literally kidnapped Quill as a kid. Imperfect doesn't begin to cover it. He's foul-mouthed, he's a criminal, he's spent Quill's entire childhood pretending the affection was incidental. And he's also the only father figure on this entire list who actually, genuinely chose the kid, over and over, for no reason except that he wanted to. And then the sequel actually ends the mentor's story for good. Yondu gives up the only oxygen supply so Quill can live, and tells him, in his own gruff way,
"He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy."
Quill loses the one person who actually chose him, and has to carry that forward on his own. It's the cleanest, saddest, most complete version of this entire arc the franchise has ever managed. Exactly what this whole thesis has been asking for. Quill's story proves something important. A mentor doesn't have to be perfect to shape a hero, but they do have to stop being untouchable.
Oh, you think you see through me, do you? Well, you don't. But I see through you!
Doctor Strange learns exactly that lesson the hard way. The Ancient One mentors Stephen out of pure ego into something closer to enlightenment, drags him from "I need to fix my hands" to "I need to fix reality" in the span of one movie. Except it turns out she's been secretly drawing power from the exact dark dimension she forbids her students from touching, keeping herself alive for centuries off the very thing she calls forbidden. Her own student rebels the second he finds out, and honestly, fair enough. Her hypocrisy is the lesson, not a betrayal of it. Strange doesn't graduate by becoming morally pure. He graduates by accepting that even his teacher had to get her hands dirty to protect the world, and that he might have to too, which is exactly why he's willing to trap himself in a time loop with a god of chaos just to buy the planet a few extra seconds.
Teach me.
No.
So now you're probably thinking, wait, Marvel can do this. They've proven it 5 different ways. So why don't they everywhere else? Now, before you grab the pitchforks, there's a real argument for why Marvel does this, and it's not a dumb one. If you're building a shared universe where everyone supposedly lives in the same New York, the same timeline, the same crossover-heavy ecosystem, it would honestly be weirder if Tony Stark just ignored a superpowered teenager fighting crime 3 subway stops from his tower. The training wheels protocol gets pitched as responsible adult behavior in a post-Avengers world. And on paper, sure, that tracks. But here's where the defense falls apart. This was never really about realism. It's about stakes. If a teenager's worst mistake can get cleaned up through his dead mentor's sunglasses, that teenager never actually faces consequences. He faces inconvenience. And an audience can feel the difference between those two things, even if they can't always name it. That ferry never really sinks. That hero never really falls. So when the credits roll, what exactly did we just watch him overcome?
I guess we'll never know.
And whenever the emotional stakes start running low, the franchise has a reliable shortcut sitting right there. Wheel out old or dead mentors via time travel or multiverse variants, and borrow some instant, unearned sentiment. At some point you have to ask, if dying doesn't actually remove someone from the story, did the death even cost anything? The hero is robbed of the absolute grief and isolation necessary to trigger profound psychological maturation. Death loses its sting, and by extension, the hero's journey loses its necessary gravity. So how do you actually fix something like this? It's simpler than it sounds, and Marvel's own good examples already prove it works. Stop giving heroes access to their mentor, not just physically, narratively. Let the hero fail, alone, with nobody coming to clean it up. That's it. That's the whole fix. Every good example on this list already did it. Yondu actually stayed dead. T'Challa actually stood alone in front of his ancestors and disagreed.
All of you are wrong! To turn your backs on the rest of the world!
The pattern isn't complicated. Marvel just doesn't apply it consistently, because consistency would mean occasionally letting a valuable mentor stay gone. So let's go back to where we started. Tony Stark spent 3 movies teaching Peter Parker how to become Spider-Man. The audience spent 3 movies waiting for Marvel to stop helping him. By the time the dust finally settles, Marvel does the one thing this franchise is structurally allergic to doing. They let the kid take off the training wheels for real in Spider-Man Brand New Day. And it's not a coincidence that it's also the most people have cried for this character since the original trilogy's quietest, saddest scene. Funny enough, the moment Peter finally loses everything is the moment he finally becomes Spider-Man. That's the whole argument in one data point, which is maybe the most uncomfortable lesson buried in all of this. Marvel keeps building these gorgeous, sprawling, interconnected safety nets for its heroes, and every single time, the best stories happen the moment those nets quietly disappear. So here's what I actually want to know. Which hero on this list do you think Marvel still hasn't let grow up? Because I've got a few candidates, and I bet you've already got one screaming in your head. Drop it in the comments, like this video, and hit subscribe, because we're nowhere close to done re-examining the MCU.